PC hardware costs keep climbing and consoles cost more than ever. The idea that gaming is an accessible hobby is starting to feel like a joke. But here's the thing. Some of the best RPGs ever made will run on a laptop from 2015, a budget PC, or a Steam Deck without breaking a sweat. These games prove that low system requirements and high quality are not mutually exclusive. Emerald Dragon is a 1989 Japanese PC RPG from Glodia that never made it west in any official form. And the version most accessible today is the Super Famicom fan translation of the 1995 console release. That's a lot of context before you've even pressed start. But what's here is one of the more emotionally resonant stories in the pre-SNES era of JRPGs, built around a relationship between a young dragon named Atorshan and a human girl, Tamarin, whom his tribe raised after a shipwreck left her stranded in their world. The combat is unusual for the time. Battles play out like a strategy RPG with direct control. You move Atorshan and attack by walking into enemies, while party members operate under AI that was amazingly smart for 1994, healing and protecting the player without wasting resources. You can interrupt at any time to direct a companion's focus, but the AI generally handles itself well. Party members gain experience through story events rather than battles, keeping them relevant across the narrative's rotating cast. The bond between Atorshan and Tamarin, one of the greatest stories ever told in the genre. Strong language that the finale comes close to justifying. Its flaws are a product of the era. The SFC version pacing collapses in the final third. Dungeon encounters get repetitive, and the emotional peak arrives before the climax. The PC Engine CD version, with full voice acting and animated cutscenes, is considered definitive, but it remains in Japanese only. The SFC fan translation is the accessible entry point, and it's worth taking. Era Fell Enhanced Edition is a 2016 RPG by two-person studio Stegosoft Games. Rebuilt with enhancements in 2020, made an RPG maker in a way that immediately makes that fact irrelevant. The floating continent of Era Fell, an archipelago of islands above a dead world, slowly losing mass since elven sorcerers cast a desperate spell centuries ago. It's one of the more lovingly designed environments in indie JRPG history, and the 16-bit pixel art hold a 94% very positive Steam rating across nearly 2,000 reviews. The game blends JRPG and Western RPG design in ways that feel considered. The world is largely open from the start. You can wander into areas above your level, which the game quietly rewards with early gear and story context. For characters, each gain new classes as the campaign progresses, with abilities selected within each class. The crafting system ties into exploration, giving scavenging purpose. What the Enhanced Edition fixed was the original's action timer, a wait mechanic that made battles drag. Without it, combat flows cleanly across the roughly 20-hour campaign. It's everything fans of retro RPGs are looking for, noting well-written characters, beautiful environments, and a story that grows more compelling as it goes. But the story's premise leans on familiar JRPG tropes, and its central vampire cult antagonists don't generate the menace the emotional stakes require. Some exit points between areas are visually ambiguous. Guidance on next objectives is occasionally vague. But Stegosoft's love for the genre comes through in every screen, and at the asking price, it's one of the most complete value propositions in the pixel JRPG space. Star Renegades is a dimension-hopping roguelite tactical RPG from Massive Damage. Published by Raw Fury in 2020, built around one of the more original structural conceits in the genre. The war you're fighting cannot be won in a single run. The Imperium, a cybernetic empire controlled by an AI called Mother, is destroying solar systems across multiple realities, and when your squad falls, a robot carries everything you've learned into the next dimension. Permanent unlocks and relationship-forged offspring from fallen warriors carry forward. The enemy officers you face level up, remember your strategies, and arrive stronger in the next run. The combat is where every run felt like a captivating new puzzle. It's JRPG adjacent at a glance. 2 rows of heroes and enemies, turns cycling through a visible timeline, but the interrupt and counter system is the actual game. Every attack has a speed value, and striking an enemy at the right moment pushes their action down the order or breaks it entirely. Spotting a chain where you can delay a lethal hit into irrelevance, then executing it across 3 characters in sequence, are some of the game's finest moments. The relationship system, where resting lets heroes bond and produce children who inherit both parents' abilities, makes late-run teams feel built rather than assembled. The pacing and meta depth, however, are limited. Runs take 6 to 8 hours, long by roguelite standards, and early stages become repetitive before enough variety unlocks. The unlockables exhaust too quickly. The combat UI is genuinely cluttered, critical information buried under particle effects and icon stacks. It's a deep, challenging game once you give it time, accurate and conditional in equal measure. Islands of the Caliph is a solo dev project from Schmidt Workshops built around a premise the CRPG genre almost never touches. A grid-based first-person dungeon crawler set in a world drawn from Islamic spiritual tradition, Arabic and Persian folklore, and a mythology of ghouls, jinn, and desert gods. It's keyboard-only, deliberately invoking 1980s design and upfront about what that means. It's purposefully designed to appeal to newcomers despite its retro trappings. It's simply a very comfy game. The exploration is the game's engine. You move through an open archipelago on a grid, mapping as you go, trading silver with merchants, learning the pillars of Islam through gameplay, prayer at mosques, almsgiving. The religion system isn't decorative, as becoming religious is one of the game's primary quests, shaping which endings remain available. The choice and consequence system is genuinely ambitious. Cities can be wiped, quests locked off, entire quest lines closed, and fixing the cascading damage you've caused is part of the game's most satisfying loop. But the game drops you in without context. No clear main objective exists until well into the campaign, and the absence of framing for who you are is a real disorientation. Keyboard-only input will immediately exclude players without patience for it. But as a game that committed fully to a cultural setting no major studio has touched with real care and built meaningful systems around it, Islands of the Caliph is worth the 14 hours it asks for. Rise of the Third Power is the second game from two-person studio Stegosoft Games, the same team behind Arafel Enhanced Edition, and it's a clear step forward in nearly every dimension. Set in a world 20 years after a devastating war, with a new authoritarian power rising from the defeated empire's ashes, it draws its political framework from 1930s Europe. The story takes adult characters seriously: a brash pirate, a disgraced noble, a veteran soldier with a complicated past, rather than defaulting to teenagers with destiny problems. The combat system is the game's most distinctive achievement. There is no normal attack. Every action on every character's menu is a skill, a charging move that builds skill points, a stronger strike that spins them, buffs that change the party's tempo. RPG Fan noted that this forces an SMT-style mindset where autopilot doesn't work. Buffs, debuffs, elemental matchups, and combo skills that trigger when the right party members are deployed together. 8 playable characters across the 20-hour campaign means the composition decisions stay interesting. It's a natural progression from Arafel with improvements in every aspect. The pacing deserves criticism. Some dungeon stretches between story beats run longer than they should. The font across menus and dialogue as genuinely difficult to read, a small studio oversight that a text-heavy game shouldn't have to live with. The humor lands unevenly, but as in SNES-era throwback that built new mechanical ideas rather than just replicating old aesthetics. Rise of the Third Power is one of the most complete indie JRPGs of recent years. Crosscode is what happens when someone takes a 16-bit action RPG, injects it with bullet hell combat, platforming puzzles, and an MMO-inspired world, then polishes it to a mirror shine. You play as Leah, a player stuck in a fictional MMO called Crossworlds, trying to recover her memories while dealing with the fact that she can barely speak. The story starts light and playful, but gradually builds into something surprisingly emotional and complex, with twists that genuinely land. The combat is fast, tight, and incredibly satisfying. You're dodging enemy attacks in real time, throwing your spinning chakram at targets, and bouncing shots off walls to hit weak points. Boss fights are elaborate puzzles where you have to learn patterns, exploit mechanics, and execute perfectly to win. The difficulty can spike hard, but the game gives you tons of options to customize your build and playstyle, so you can always find a way forward. Exploration and puzzle solving are just as important as combat. Dungeons are filled with environmental puzzles that require precise timing, creative use of your abilities, and sometimes just sitting back to figure out the logic. The world is huge, colorful, and packed with secrets, side quests, and NPCs that actually feel like part of a living game world. The main flaw is pacing. The game is long, easily 30+ hours for a first playthrough, and some dungeons drag on longer than they should. The story can feel slow in the middle, and if you're not into puzzles, some sections will test your patience. But if you want a pixel RPG that combines action, exploration, and story into one incredibly polished package, Crosscode is essential. Black Souls is what happens when someone takes Dark Souls, Alice in Wonderland, and a disturbing amount of cosmic horror, then throws them into an RPG Maker blender. You're wandering through a twisted fairy tale world where nothing is what it seems, and the cute storybook aesthetic is hiding some of the darkest, most unsettling content you'll find in any RPG. The combat system borrows heavily from Dark Souls, stamina management, dodge rolling, tough bosses that will punish every mistake. But it's all presented in a top-down pixel format that somehow makes the horror hit even harder because your imagination fills in the gaps. The best part is how it handles difficulty and exploration. Enemies respawn when you rest, but the world is interconnected with shortcuts that loop back on themselves, rewarding you for pushing forward into dangerous areas. Boss fights are brutal pattern recognition tests, and some of them will absolutely wreck you until you figure out the trick. The story goes to some genuinely disturbing places, mixing philosophical questions about identity with imagery that's not for the faint of heart. Here's the obvious catch. It's RPG Maker, so expect janky menus, occasional bugs, and a learning curve that assumes you already know what you're doing. The English translation can be rough in spots, and some puzzles are obtuse to the point of needing a guide. But if you want a pixel RPG that's willing to go to places most games won't even look at, Black Souls is unforgettable. Just know what you're getting into. This isn't cozy retro gaming. Chained Echoes is a modern JRPG that takes inspiration from the Super Nintendo Golden Age and then adds a bunch of quality of life improvements that make it feel fresh instead of nostalgic. The story follows multiple characters caught in a war between kingdoms, mechs, magic, and political intrigue, and it manages to balance serious themes with fun character moments without feeling tonally inconsistent. The pacing is tight, no grinding required, no random encounters, just a streamlined adventure that respects your time. Combat uses a turn-based system with an overdrive gauge that constantly shifts between green, yellow, and red zones. Staying in the green gives you bonuses, but certain attacks push you toward the red, where enemies get stronger. It creates this constant risk-reward tension where you're always thinking 2 or 3 turns ahead. Party members can combine attacks, swap in and out mid-battle, and even pilot mech for large-scale fights that completely change the combat dynamics. The world design is excellent. Each area feels distinct, with unique environments, monsters, and challenges. Exploration is rewarding because secrets are everywhere. Hidden bosses, optional dungeons, powerful gear, and the game encourages you to backtrack as you gain new abilities. The music is phenomenal, perfectly capturing that SNES JRPG energy while still sounding modern. The downsides are minor, but worth mentioning. Some dungeons have frustrating puzzles that rely on trial and error, and a few late-game difficulty spikes can feel cheap. The story, while engaging, doesn't break new ground. It's well executed, but not groundbreaking. Still, if you miss classic JRPGs, but want something that doesn't waste your time, Chained Echoes is one of the best. Crystal Project is a love letter to Final Fantasy V and the job system JRPGs of the SNES era, but with a massive open world and platforming exploration that makes it feel completely unique. You're dropped into a colorful world with almost no guidance, and the game trusts you to figure things out. Want to tackle the hardest dungeon first? Go ahead. Want to avoid combat and just explore? You could do that too. The job system is incredibly deep, with 20+ classes to unlock and master. You can mix and match abilities to create absurd combinations. A tanky mage, a healing thief, a support character who controls the battlefield. The combat is turn-based and challenging, with bosses that require actual strategy instead of just level grinding. The difficulty is no joke, and optional super bosses will destroy you unless you understand the systems deeply. Exploration is the real star. The world is packed with platforming challenges that require precise jumping and creative use of abilities. Finding a new crystal unlocks a new job, and hunting them down is addictive. The world is huge, colorful, and filled with secrets that reward curiosity and persistence. The downside is that it's extremely hands-off. There's barely any story. NPCs give minimal guidance. And if you don't like figuring things out yourself, you'll be frustrated. The graphics are simple even by pixel standards, and the music, while catchy, can get repetitive. But if you want a pixel RPG with deep systems, challenging combat, and exploration that respects your intelligence, Crystal Project is phenomenal. Drova takes the exploration-heavy design of Gothic and translates it into a 2D pixel RPG where every inch of the world feels handcrafted and meaningful. You're part of a nomadic tribe trying to survive in a harsh, unforgiving land, and the game immediately makes it clear that you're not special. You're just another person trying to make it through the day. The world is filled with factions that don't care about you, and your survival depends on learning the rules fast and picking your battles carefully. The gameplay loop is all about exploration and gradual progression. You'll wander into areas way above your level, get destroyed, and have to come back later with better gear and more knowledge. Combat is real-time and deliberate, requiring you to manage stamina, read enemy patterns, and know when to retreat. There's no hand-holding. Quests don't mark themselves on your map. NPCs give vague directions, and you have to actually pay attention to conversations to figure out where to go next. What makes this special is how lived in the world feels. Every NPC has a routine, factions have conflicting interests, and your choices ripple out in ways that close off entire quest lines if you're not careful. The writing is grounded and mature, avoiding the usual fantasy tropes in favor of a more realistic depiction of survival and tribal politics. The flaws are mainly in polish. Some UI elements are clunky, combat can feel stiff until you get used to the timing, and the difficulty spikes hard if you wander into the wrong area too early. But if you love Gothic or want a pixel RPG that treats you like an adult, Drova is one of the most underrated games on this list. Blasphemous takes the Metroidvania formula and drenches it in Catholic guilt, religious horror, and some of the most disturbing pixel art ever created. You play as the Penitent One, a silent warrior trapped in an endless cycle of punishment, and the world is dripping with grotesque imagery, twisted saints, bleeding sculptures, and environments that feel like walking through a nightmare cathedral. The atmosphere is oppressive, gorgeous, and utterly unique. The combat is deliberate and punishing. Every enemy can kill you if you're not paying attention, and boss fights are brutal tests of pattern recognition and execution. You have a parry system that rewards perfect timing, execution moves that restore health, and a guilt mechanic that punishes death by reducing your max health until you recover your guilt. It's Dark Souls inspired, but faster and more aggressive, rewarding skillful play over cautious turtling. Blasphemous 2 refines everything. Combat is smoother, the world is bigger, and the grotesque art style is even more detailed. You get multiple weapons this time, each changing your playstyle completely, and the level design is tighter with better checkpoints and quality of life improvements. Both games are phenomenal, but the sequel is the more polished experience. But to be fair, the first game has some backtracking issues and a few obtuse puzzles that require guides to solve. The story is intentionally cryptic, told through item descriptions and environmental storytelling. So if you want clear answers, you'll be disappointed. But if you want a pixel Metroidvania that's dripping with atmosphere and challenging combat, Blasphemous is essential. Stone Shard is a turn-based, open-world RPG that wants you to suffer, and it's unapologetic about it. You're a mercenary trying to survive in a low-fantasy world where a broken leg can end your career and infections can kill you slowly if you don't treat them properly. The game uses a detailed injury system where every body part can be damaged individually. Bleed out from a leg wound, go blind from head injury, or starve to death because you couldn't find food in time. It's brutal, methodical, and designed for players who love the idea of survival mechanics layered on top of tactical combat. The combat itself is excellent. It's grid-based and turn-based, with positioning and terrain playing huge roles in every fight. You can shove enemies into traps, use elevation for advantage, or kite dangerous foes around obstacles. Build variety is massive, letting you specialize in different weapon types, magic schools, or hybrid approaches. But the real challenge is managing everything outside of combat. Hunger, thirst, pain, morale, and the economy that makes every gold coin feel valuable. The world is procedurally generated with handcrafted towns and dungeons scattered throughout, and exploration feels rewarding because you're always hunting for better gear, rare ingredients, or safer routes. The atmosphere is oppressive and gray, perfectly matching the tone of a world that doesn't care if you live or die. The downside is that it's still in early access, so content runs out eventually, and some systems feel incomplete. The difficulty can be frustrating when RNG decides to ruin a perfect run, and the grind can feel excessive if you're not into the survival sim aspects. But if you want a pixel RPG that makes you respect every decision, Stone Shard is one of the most ambitious projects out there. Fall Skies is a narrative-heavy JRPG that focuses on exploration, atmosphere, and characters over combat. You play as a girl searching for a missing father in a world that's equal parts whimsical and melancholic. And the whole game has this dreamlike quality that makes it feel like you're wandering through someone's fading memories. The pixel art is soft and painterly, and the soundtrack is hauntingly beautiful. The gameplay is deliberately minimalist. Combat exists, but it's simple and infrequent. The real focus is on exploration, dialogue, and uncovering the mysteries of the world. You'll spend most of your time talking to strange NPCs, solving environmental puzzles, and piecing together the story through fragments and implications. It's slow-paced and contemplative, designed for players who want to soak in the atmosphere rather than grind levels. The story is the main draw, dealing with themes of loss, identity, and the nature of reality. The writing is thoughtful and often poetic, and the characters feel genuine even when they're being deliberately strange. The world is small but densely packed with secrets, and exploration always feels rewarding even when you're just finding another piece of lore. The downside is that it's very niche. If you need constant action or clear objectives, you'll bounce off hard. The combat is bare bones, and some players will find the pacing too slow or the story too abstract. But But if you want a pixel RPG that prioritizes mood and narrative over mechanics, False Skies is a hidden gem that deserves way more attention. Scald is a love letter to the old-school CRPGs from the late 80s and early 90s, and it nails that vibe so perfectly it feels like a time travel from 1989. You're thrown into a grim fantasy world where cosmic horror seeps into every corner, and the writing is dense, atmospheric, and unapologetically brutal. The game uses a first-person dungeon-crawling perspective mixed with top-down exploration, and every encounter feels dangerous because resources are scarce and death is permanent if you're not careful. Combat is turn-based and tactical, forcing you to think about positioning, party composition, and whether you can actually afford to waste that last healing potion. The character creation is deep, letting you build weird combinations of skills and backgrounds that open up different dialogue options and solutions to problems. The world reacts to your choices in subtle ways. NPCs remember what you did, quests can fail if you take too long, and some doors close permanently based on early decisions. The atmosphere is the real star here. The pixel art is gorgeous in a haunting way, and the soundtrack sets this oppressive tone that never lets up. You're constantly exploring cursed ruins, dealing with cultists, and uncovering secrets that make you wish you'd stayed home. It's slow-paced and methodical, which some players will love and others will bounce off hard. The downside? It's extremely old school, meaning if you're not into reading tons of text, managing inventory weight, and dealing with archaic UI design, this will feel like work. But if you miss the days when RPGs demanded your full attention and didn't hold your hand, Scald is one of the best modern examples of that philosophy. Before Baldur's Gate 3 became the CRPG standard, the original games defined the genre. These are the Infinity Engine classics that proved D&D could work in a video game, and they still hold up if you can get past the old-school presentation. You start as a nobody fleeing assassination attempts, and by the end of BG2, you're dealing with gods, planar travel, and decisions that shape the Forgotten Realms. The combat is real-time with pause, meaning you're constantly freezing the action to issue commands, position your party, and coordinate spells. It's tactical, challenging, and deeply satisfying once you learn the systems. The spell system is pure AD&D. Mages are glass cannons who can reshape reality. Clerics are support powerhouses, and fighters just hit things really hard. Party composition matters, and building a balanced team is half the fun. The writing and world building are legendary. NPCs have personalities, agendas, and conflicts with each other. Romances actually feel earned instead of forced. Side quests are creative and often morally gray. BG2 especially is massive, with enough content to last 100+ hours if you explore everything. The downsides are purely technical. The enhanced editions fix a lot of bugs and add quality of life features, but the core UI is still from 1998. Pathfinding is janky. Combat can be confusing for newcomers, and the difficulty spikes are brutal if you don't understand the systems. But if you want to see where modern CRPGs came from, and you want a pixel RPG with unmatched depth, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are required playing. Horizon's Gate is a tactical RPG mixed with open-world sailing exploration, and it's shockingly deep for how simple it looks. You're a captain with a ship, a crew, and an entire archipelago to explore, trade, fight, and uncover secrets in. The game gives you complete freedom. Become a merchant, a pirate, a monster hunter, or just sail around discovering islands and hidden dungeons. The combat is grid-based and tactical, with a class system that lets you mix and match abilities to create unique builds. Every character in your crew can be customized, and battles reward smart positioning, terrain usage, and ability synergies. The difficulty scales well, with optional challenges that will test even veteran tactics fans. What makes this special is how everything connects. Trading routes affect economies. faction reputation changes available quests, and the monsters you hunt drop materials for crafting better gear. The exploration is rewarding because every island has something. Maybe a hidden boss, maybe a new crew member, maybe just a beautiful view. The ship combat is simple but fun, and upgrading your vessel feels meaningful. The flaws are mainly in presentation. The graphics are extremely basic, the UI is functional but not pretty, and the story is minimal. Some systems are poorly explained, and you'll spend the first few hours figuring out how everything works. But if you want a pixel RPG with incredible freedom and deep tactical combat, Horizon's Gate is one of the best indie RPGs nobody talks about. Sea of Stars is the most gorgeous pixel RPG on this list, and it's not even close. Every frame looks like a painting, with lighting effects and animations that push the 2D art style to its absolute limit. But it's not just pretty. It's a loving homage to Chrono Trigger and classic turn-based JRPGs, with modern tweaks that make combat feel active and engaging instead of passive and menu-driven. The combat system is deceptively simple. You have normal attacks, timed hits for extra damage, and combo abilities that require coordination between party members. Enemies have locks that you need to break by hitting them with specific damage types before their big attacks go off, which keeps you constantly engaged instead of just mashing the attack button. Boss fights are elaborate puzzles where you have to figure out their patterns, break their locks, and time your abilities perfectly to win. The story is straightforward but charming. Two kids train to become solstice warriors who can harness the power of the sun and moon to fight an evil alchemist. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel, but the characters are likable, the writing is tight, and the world feels alive with personality. Exploration is rewarding, with hidden treasures, optional challenges, and gorgeous environments that make you want to explore every corner. The main criticism is that it plays it too safe. If you're looking for narrative depth or complex systems, you won't find them here. The difficulty is on the easier side, and while the timed hits add engagement, combat never reaches the strategic depth of something like Chained Echoes. But if you want a beautiful, relaxing pixel JRPG that nails the fundamentals, Sea of Stars is a masterclass. Fear and Hunger is not only a game, it's an endurance test disguised as a dungeon crawler. The first game drops you into a nightmare dungeon where everything is trying to kill you, corrupt you, or worse, and the RNG can decide your fate before you even get a chance to react. Limbs can be severed, sanity can break, and party members can die in the most horrific ways imaginable. It's punishing, disturbing, and deliberately unfair, but that's the entire point. Every run teaches you something new, and slowly you start to understand the twisted logic of the world. The second game shifts the setting to a 1940s-inspired city where multiple characters are forced into a deadly contest, and the cosmic horror escalates to mind-bending levels. The sequel is more refined, better balance, more build variety, and a stronger narrative structure, but still brutally difficult and filled with imagery that will stick with you long after you stop playing. The gameplay is old-school turn-based combat mixed with roguelike randomness and survival horror resource management. You're constantly making impossible choices. Do you use your last healing item now or save it for the boss? Do you trust this NPC or assume they'll betray you? The coin flip mechanic can save your life or end your run instantly, and it creates this constant tension that few games can match. But these games are rough around the edges. The RPG Maker engine, as always, shows its limits. Some mechanics are poorly explained, and the difficulty can feel cheap at times. The content is also extremely dark. SA, body horror, existential dread. So this isn't for everyone. But if you want a pixel RPG that genuinely unsettles you and makes every victory feel earned, Fear and Hunger is unforgettable. Wizardom is what you get when someone decides to make Hexen with 30 years of design hindsight. Developed by Emberheart Games and published by Apogee, it puts you in the boots of one of the last mages of the Wizardom Sanctuary, sent into the shattered kingdom of Terrabruma to push back an army of chaos. That pitch is pure boomer shooter DNA. Strafing, bunny hopping, chunky pixels, and map stuffed with secrets at an average of 16 per mission. It separates itself from pure nostalgia is the layered design. Each weapon is a spell, fire rings, frost staffs, a sorcerer's strike, and everyone has an upgrade that changes how it functions, not just how hard it hits. Between missions, a sorcerer's shop converts looted gold into capacity upgrades, seeding a light RPG loop across 3 episodes. The level design channels the interconnected shortcut logic of Dark Souls more than the corridor structure of Doom. Locked gates seen through gaps in earlier walls, switches that open doors across the map, secrets that reward observation rather than luck. It's a wonderful throwback whose technical limitations only enhance its retro feel. Multiple reviewers noted uneven pacing in the back half and bosses that drain HP longer than the encounter design justifies. The class choice offers different spell kits, but the progression between them isn't clearly explained. The enemy sound design undersells their threat in ways that hurt the tension. For the price, Wizardom is exactly what the pixel FPS genre needed. A game that takes the premise seriously enough to build something that feels genuinely its own. Before Bethesda turned Fallout into a first-person shooter, the series was a top-down, turn-based RPG where your intelligence stat could make you completely illiterate and your choices could doom entire towns. Fallout 1 drops you into a post-nuclear wasteland with one mission: find a water chip or your vault dies. The time limit creates urgency, and every decision matters because you can't do everything in one playthrough. The genius of these games is in the freedom. You can talk your way out of almost any situation, sneak past enemies, or go full combat psycho. The special system and perk trees let you create wildly different characters: a smooth-talking diplomat, a science genius, a drug-addicted melee berserker. The world reacts to your build and your choices, with multiple solutions to every problem and consequences that ripple across the entire game. The sequel expands everything: bigger world, more companions, deeper systems, and a story that's equal parts dark humor and genuine tragedy. The writing is sharp, the quests are creative, and the freedom is unmatched. You can become a Pawn Star, a slaver, a crime boss, or a heroic savior, and the game lets you live with those choices. Despite all that, these games are old and they feel old. The UI is clunky, combat is slow, and you'll need to read the manual or a guide to understand half the systems. Random encounters can be brutal, and some quests are obtuse without hints. But if you can get past the data mechanics, these are some of the best RPGs ever made, and they'll run on literally anything.